If you don't know how to get from no garden bed to garden bed, maybe you have a lawn, maybe you have a weedy area, you want to start a garden bed for landscaping, vegetable gardening, flower gardening, to plant a fruit tree, whatever it is. Today we will cover some incredible mulching and soil building and weed smothering and garden bed creation methods that I believe everyone should know, whether you are a new gardener or a more experienced gardener. If you've heard of these methods before and you don't get super giddy, then you probably don't fully understand the methods or how helpful or powerful or complex they are. The methods are sheet mulching, lasagna gardening, and hugelkultur. When customized to meet your needs, these methods are easy and efficient, and they're just great strategies for smothering weeds and lawns to create either a mulched area or a new garden bed without any digging or tilling or spraying or large equipment needed. You can adapt these methods for large areas or for small areas to add a little bit of nutrients to the soil or a lot. And shockingly, these methods can even become a little bit controversial, and I bet that you never thought that a YouTube video about mulch could include any controversy, but there is some, and we'll address that. I'll share information and considerations and resources along the way so you can learn more, you can consider the options, and decide what's best for you and your yard. So first we're going to start with the simplest method. Sheet mulching is defined simply as adding layers or sheets of compostable materials to smother out weeds or lawns, and then mulch on top. That's always the final layer to prevent weeds. And there are many different methods and material options. Lasagna gardening is very similar. It's often considered a very specific method of sheet mulching, maybe a little bit more complex than some kinds of sheet mulching. Lasagna gardening is not about growing the ingredients that are needed to make lasagna, like tomatoes and basil. I have been asked that before. Though that sounds awesome, that's not what the method is. This is a method of mulching that includes multiple layers of organic materials. Like when you make a lasagna, you have the layers of the different ingredients. So the way you layer, what ingredients you add, that can all vary depending on what you have on hand, and also depending on what soil you have and what your goals are for the space. There are some key components, so I'll go through some recipes. That's what I'm going to call them, because we're expanding on the whole lasagna thing, right? So I also want you to remember that these recipes are just guidelines. They're starting points. They're for informational purposes only, because you could live anywhere in the world and best practices are different everywhere, and every yard is different too. Recipe 1, starting with the simplest recipe, has only one main ingredient. And if your goal is to just smother an area, create a mulched area, the minimum you need is an organic woody mulch material, ideally arborist chips. And that's it. That's just one ingredient. It might be all you need if you've got pretty good soil and just weeds or a lawn that you want to smother out. If you want to create a mulched area, you don't want to plant into it, then this method would work. This recipe would work as well as recipe number 2. But again, if you have pretty good soil, this still might be everything you need. Sometimes your native soil or what you have in your area already, in your lawn or in a garden area already, may be enough for some well-adapted landscape plants, native plants, and even some edible producing things like fruit trees and some shrubs. But it definitely depends on your existing soil. Landscape plants just don't always need a ton of extra fertilizer, a ton of extra compost. It just depends. If you ever hear someone say that there's no such thing as too much compost, that's kind of a myth. There was a time when I thought this was true, because compost is amazing and wonderful, but it's a blanket statement. The generalization, that alone is worth questioning, because every yard is different. This isn't a helpful rule of thumb, because at a certain point you may not need compost. Your yard may have sufficient nutrients and organic matter and a good soil structure, so you just might not need it. Also, depending on the compost that you use, it is possible to end up with an excess of certain nutrients that may build up or wash away. Your first step should be to figure out what you have and what you need, so you don't buy or bring in compost that you don't need. The best thing to do is to start with a soil test. You can mail in a soil sample to a local soil testing lab. If you search for garden soil testing in your area, I'm sure a ton of results will come up with different price ranges. And then from there, you can also reach out to a local master gardener helpline, for example, or other local gardening resource, just to get information about your native soil. Share your goals, get information about your soil, and then make a decision. You may not need a ton of organic matter, a ton of compost, a ton of fertilizers or amendments. You may be okay with just mulching the area. But for this recipe, for recipe 1, the most important thing is to go deep enough with this one layer of mulch. I know that some people will say 6 inches is plenty over just a simple lawn. Other sources say you need a minimum of 8 to 12 inches, which sounds like a lot, but it settles very quickly. And depending on what you're smothering, you may want to use more than that. You may not need as much. But if you want to use less mulch, move on to recipe 2, where I have a little bit of a shortcut if you don't want to end up with an 8-inch deep layer of arborist chip mulch in your yard. Again, It settles down pretty quickly, but there's other options. Note that this is not a recipe that you can plant into right away. You have to give the mulch some time to smother out the weeds, the lawn, to settle down, to start decomposing before you can plant your landscape. Many folks will do this in the fall. They'll smother out a lawn or an area with a really deep application of an organic woody mulch material like arborist chips in the fall, and then wait until spring and then plant their landscape. Odd as it may sound, some people will remove the extra couple of inches from the top. When they use this method, they'll just, rake off a couple of inches so that they still have, 4 to 6 inches there to prevent weeds from coming in or anything else from coming up from below. But once everything's decomposed, you don't need this 8 to 12 inches anymore. At this point, it has settled quite a bit. You just need a few inches there to prevent weeds from coming in or from coming up from below, but those extra wood chips you could use somewhere else. I've never done this myself. I do know that other people do this when they use this method. Just something to consider. I've mentioned on this channel before, it is a myth that the arborist chips will deplete the nitrogen in your soil. They do take up nitrogen as they're decomposing, but just in that area where they're decomposing. And after that, they actually can release nitrogen into the soil. This method adds organic matter to your soil. It thrills soil life, but it doesn't necessarily add as many nutrients as some annual vegetable gardens may need, or if your soil's really poor, you may need a little bit more than this. Finally, I want to note that you can get free arborist chips delivered from local arborists, perhaps by using apps or sites that can connect you to these arborists, like Chip Drop, for example. I'll link to that below. There may be other examples depending on where you live. Learn more about mulch materials in my mulch videos. I will also link to that playlist all about mulch below this video. Depending on who you ask, this recipe number 1, is not considered sheet mulching. Some people consider sheet mulching when you move on to what I'm sharing in recipe 2 and so on. But I'm sharing this here right now because many people consider this to be the simplest way to go. So this is the simplest method of creating a new garden bed. It may be all you need. This isn't my personal favorite method as it can be hard to get this many wood chips. So another sheet mulching method that I have personally had success with is to put down a layer of cardboard on top of a weedy area or a lawn and then a few inches of mulch on top of that. Cardboard is commonly used in sheet mulching, though it comes with a lot of controversy and a lot of pros and cons. And I have a whole video you may have seen all about this, which I highly recommend. But just remember the most important thing, cardboard smothers. So don't do this around plants that you want to keep happy and healthy, and wait to plant your landscape plants until the cardboard decomposes if you're using this method, if you're using this recipe. But again, this is a really common thing to do over lawns or weedy areas in the fall, and then wait until spring to plant when that cardboard's basically gone. The cardboard needs to be wet to decompose too. That really helps. The benefit of using cardboard, the reason everybody's using cardboard despite all of its downsides, is that it's good at smothering on its own, and that means that you need slightly less mulch on top of it. You do need that mulch on top of the cardboard because it traps that moisture under there, keeps the cardboard from blowing away, and I like to poke some holes in the cardboard with like a pitchfork, just a little bit, not so much that the grass and the weeds can then start growing through, but just enough that it lets some water through. I've personally had success with 1 layer of cardboard and ideally 4 to 6 inches of an organic woody mulch material. I've also gotten away with 3 inches of, over just a lawn, and I still had some weeds popping through from that. But if you have slightly less mulch, you could get away with it. You could mow or weed eat or pull out the weeds from an area first, or just stomp them down. I like to pretend that cutting them down sets them back a bit, but it's not really necessary if you're smothering them properly. But it can make the area a lot neater to work with, a little less bumpy. It's up to you, and it depends on the weeds that you're dealing with. Note that if you are dealing with super aggressive, invasive weed species, you may want to reach out to a local expert to make sure that you are applying materials deep enough to properly smother out this aggressive or invasive weed, or maybe there's some other method that's recommended in your area for proper removal of this species. But what if your soil isn't as nice? What if you want to amend or add compost to your soil? Consider recipe 3. Similar to the last method, but if you want to amend the soil with a little extra something and smother simultaneously and use less organic woody mulch material, fewer arborist chips, you don't want to go 8 inches deep. I've had great success with 1 layer of cardboard, an inch or so of compost, and a few inches of an organic woody mulch material on top of that, like 3 or 4 inches. The more the merrier when it comes to arborist chips, especially when it comes to the amount of compost you need. Remember, again, that a soil test is the best way to find out. You may not need this organic matter and you may not need a lot of compost. You can also substitute the compost for a little bit of a soil mix, like a 3-way or 4-way soil mix, which is, different soil blends. You may have different kinds of soil blends available in your area. Depends on what you need, but this is a great method. You start with that cardboard right on top of the lawn or the weedy area, a little bit of that amendment, and then on top of that, some sort of organic woody mulch material to seal it off and to prevent those weeds from moving in. Again, you must still give the cardboard a little bit of time to decompose and go away before you plant your landscape or garden plants for the happiest possible plants. And if you don't want to use the cardboard, just don't, and just be sure to mulch a little bit deeper. You can just do on top of a lawn or a weedy area, do a few inches of your organic soil amendment, your compost, whatever you want to use, and then go with that really deep application of your organic woody mulch material. Remember that compost is not mulch. Compost is what happens to mulch after it decomposes. Compost is decomposed organic matter. You'll notice that these first 3 recipes more than likely require that you bring in some organic materials from somewhere else. Of course, you may be composting on site. Maybe you had an arbor scum and prune a tree and shred those limbs up into arborist chips. That's great. But ideally, you want to start utilizing some of these organic materials that you may already have on site. Leaves, grass clippings, things like that. That's where recipe 4 comes in. This is where things start to get even more exciting. We're going to incorporate a ton of different ingredients. But I'm going to stop with a cliffhanger right now. I know it's a little bit tacky, but I don't want these videos to be too long. They're not the most thrilling topic in the whole world. So in the next video, we're going to talk about recipe 4, get into some additional details. I hate it when a YouTuber creates a series of videos like this and then it's difficult to find the next part. So I will make sure that the video that pops up on the screen, once it's out, the video that pops up on the screen will be the next part in this series. And also, if you check out the link in the description below this video, there will be a link to the whole playlist so you can find all of those videos in order. So it's really easy for you to find part 2, part 3, or go back if you would like to do so. So check out that link. And if you're new here, hello, my name's Eve. Welcome to Garden Project Academy. And I've created Garden Project Academy and this YouTube channel, as well as some upcoming online courses to help you with your next garden project. Help you create something beautiful, beneficial with this opportunity. You have to do some gardening, some landscaping, whether it's in your own yard or if it's in a community space, wherever you're gardening. So check out the additional resources linked below this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video where we will talk about recipe 4.